electrical vehicles, EVs, is gaining serious momentum around the world. Multiple countries, including the United States, have already passed a passenger EV tipping point when sales reach critical mass, after which adoption accelerates. In the United States, owning a light duty EV is now cheaper than owning a gas powered car over a vehicle's lifespan. This lower cost of ownership is thanks to ongoing savings from using electricity rather than fuel, less maintenance, and other recurring benefits. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Analytics Insight, the podcast where we explore the ideas, technologies, and strategies shaping the business revolution. Now, what prevents people from switching to electric vehicles? For many, it is not just the upfront cost or range anxiety, but the uncertainty surrounding their resale and salvage value. A major concern for financiers, especially, is the battery, as it accounts for nearly 40% of an EV's total cost. The uncertain value of used EV batteries largely stems from difficulty in accurately determining the state of health, and it depends equally, if not more, on battery intelligence as well. Let's welcome Arjun Sinha Roy, co founder and CEO of iRasus, to help us understand the relation between EV adoption and battery intelligence. Hi, Arjun, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And thanks for having me on the podcast.
Great, Arjun. It's a pleasure to have you with us on our podcast today. And of course, we are, going to discuss something that's been trending since the last couple of years. We're talking about EVs. Everybody's, having a lot of questions around EV and the adoption around EV vehicles. But, before we dive deeper into our conversation today, we would like to know more about Irises, a pretty interesting and a fascinating name, I would say. So, we would like to know more about the company, its specialization, or any particular solution the company is offering.
Okay, the name irises actually came in a very interesting way. I stands for the internet. Ra is the Egyptian sun god, which represents, our focus on renewable energy and climate change technology, and SUS stands for sustainability. So the idea is very simple. We would like to use the internet to drive the adoption of renewable energy and drive sustainability. That's how the name comes across as an anagram. And our background is very simple. Irises believes that the core pillar of climate tech and climate change is going to be battery storage. We can generate electricity from wind and solar, but in order to drive the adoption, we need to store it somewhere and generate it where it's required. And we felt that battery storage is crucial to that. And also the fact that battery storage and its adoption will depend on how we are able to convince the users of batteries that it is safe, reliable, and affordable to use. And to do that, what we felt was the core solution should be that we should be able to understand batteries well enough to give that confidence to the end users. So our focus has been on essentially building the digital infrastructure which will extract battery data on a real-time basis. And then using this data, we create a digital clone of the battery and the digital asset which the battery is powering on a real-time basis. We have a lot of proprietary algorithms which work on then building an understanding, analysis of the battery performance on a real-time basis. And the insights are then used to drive different kinds of applications. A bulk of our applications have been in the electric vehicle space, and very soon we are also entering the stationary storage space, which is popularly called BESS, as well as primarily the solar and the diesel replacement market. So this is what we are powering, and this is what the analytics that we do is enabling.
Thank you so much, Arjun, for sharing that detailed overview. So glad to, understand how you're using the different forms of emerging technologies to drive renewable and sustainable energy. And, you're carving out a niche in such specialized environment. And this really sets the stage for us to dive deeper into the impact you're creating. So, having said that, we also want to know about you, Arjun. You are a startup, leadership, technology, consulting expertise, and you're also strategic leader managing CXO engagement with nearly 25 years of experience. So, can you tell us more about yourself? How has the journey been till date? And, what triggered the birth of Irises, and what exactly is your contribution towards the company?
So iRasus started off in 2018. So before that, I was in the corporate sector. I'd done a startup stint before that. Just to give a little context, I and my co-founder both are graduates of BITS Pilani, and both of us, come from different generations. I graduated in '99 with a degree in mechanical. I have a dual degree in economics and mechanical, and my co-founder Anirudh has a degree in electrical and electronics engineering. And both of us, when we met through our alumni network. Both of us felt that it is important to look at where is the next big opportunity or which is the next big problem statement to solve. I had spent a lot of time in technology, and within technology, I had spent a lot of time in the telecom sector. And I had seen the evolution of industry from the early days into mobile internet, and how the mobile internet had enabled the creation of the Internet of Things, and how everything was getting connected to the internet. So we felt that the power of the internet can be used in a way which can revolutionize the way we can bring new technology to the industry. And we were just looking at what are the big problem statements and what are the big challenge areas where we could actually work and make a dent. And we felt that climate tech was the next big problem to solve. And within that, of course, my co-founder Anirudh was working in the renewable space. He was trying to build a startup in that space, in the solar space. So we started initially working towards building something in the solar, and then we very quickly pivoted towards batteries. We got a lot of guidance from folks in the industry who said, like, look, anything that you do, battery is going to be center stage, because that is where all the action is going to be. And if you're going to work on batteries, it is important that the understanding of battery and its complexities is demystified for the end users. So the battery itself, we realized, was a very complex piece of engineering. There is chemistry involved, there is electrical energy, there is an electronics, there's a PCB which goes in, which has programming involved, and everything needs to synchronize and everything needs to harmonize and work together to make an efficient use of the battery. And if you remember in the early days, there were a lot of issues in battery adoption, and there were other problems as well. So we felt that if we can just focus all our energies in understanding the battery data which is coming in, and then using that data to kind of get insights and then use the insights to drive business operations, we would be solving a major problem for the end users. And I think, this thesis that we adopted in the early days obviously had to be tested in the market. We had to go into the market and sell this concept. And that was initially a little tough because we launched thick in the middle of COVID. I think by the time we were ready with our beta platform, COVID had started, and then so things got delayed. But we finally were able to get things moving. And over a period of time, I think we've been able to get some traction in the market, and now we have a reasonable amount of customer base. We are scaling up fast, and what we have built is something that is getting adopted by the industry, both battery companies as well as OEMs. And this is something that we want to take to the market and scale up as well.
Right, definitely makes sense, Arjun, and thank you for, sharing how insightful, your role has been and how closely you're tied to the larger vision of the company. And of course, you mentioned about battery being the battery vertical in the EV section is so complicated, and there's so many aspects that are involved, which you just rightly mentioned. And, I think eventually the end goal is to make the efficient use of the battery. So, I want to dive deeper into what we just spoke about. Now, if battery is the heart of an EV, then the battery management system is its brain. So, this is not just a statement, it is a foundational truth that lies behind the rapid acceleration of electric mobility. Now, it's pioneering innovations such as wireless technology and the IoT integration enhance not only performance but also ensure its safety and reliability. Meanwhile, its design flexibility can efficiently manage the system's unique characteristics like thermal properties, voltage windows, degradation mechanisms, etc. So, when we think of EV adoption, most discussions revolve around the hardware and manufacturing scale. So, why do you believe that battery intelligence is just as critical for the future of EVs?
So let me give you a little background of where I'm coming from. Every industry, when it starts off with hard physical infrastructure, think telecom, because that's the industry I have worked in for nearly 15 to 20 years. I worked there. Think any industry. What comes is first the physical infrastructure. People build the telecom towers, people build the mobile phones, and then you start building the back-end systems to make it run efficiently. Can you today walk into an airport and imagine a scenario where all IT systems and all intelligence systems, all analytics just collapses? all airline operations will be shut, airport operations will be shut. So I think that is something which is a logical conclusion, and anyone who spent time in the IT industry or in technology will attune to that, that the moment physical infrastructure comes in, you need the digital infrastructure to power that. I think that was very clear to Anirudh and me when we started off. The question was, when will it come? And I think we were very clear that, as you rightly said, a lot of people in the early days were looking at the incentives being given by the government and putting up the hardware infrastructure, putting in the chargers, building the batteries, building the chemistry around batteries, innovating there. And given Anirudh and my background, we felt that both of us came from tech backgrounds and we had spent our time, in the software space. We felt that we could probably innovate around the digital aspects of it and the analytics aspect and the intelligence aspects and build a niche for ourselves. That was the first thing that, we wanted to play to our strength. Second, I think what's important is to understand that today it is not possible to launch any business without the back-end intelligence and the digital infrastructure to be in place. So we felt that, the adoption of digital backend will start very fast. And I think it just took us 2 or 3 years. We lost some time in COVID, but I think within a couple of years, it was very clear that the battery itself sends out data. Each data point is essentially telling you what the battery is doing at that point in time. As you rightly said, the BMS is the heart. It is telling you voltage, current, temperature, cell conditions. And each of these data points and its analysis is important to understand how the battery is behaving at a certain point in time. What we've done over the years is, we've kind of built a model which looks at the battery data and breaks it out into 4 broad parameters, the operational parameters, the performance parameters, the safety and aging parameters, and the revenue parameters. And once you start deciphering the data and then you start putting algorithms which are then looking at these charts, insights, and then using a bit of machine learning to kind of start looking at inferring and patterns, you understand that all of this is critical to make a system work. So we work very closely with the bus industry. Today, we are managing almost 2,500 plus buses on the platform, electric buses. And you can understand that a typical bus will cost about 2 crore plus. The battery itself, number of batteries vary, but the value of the batteries inside the bus will be almost 60 to 70 lakhs. And imagine a situation where buses are running and you have a problem, you have a breakdown. And what are the consequences of the breakdown? Apart from the revenue loss, reputational loss, asset issues in asset management, there is also the question of spare parts management. There's a lot of money involved out there. So, I'll give you one simple use case. We are looking at, for example, the battery data which is coming in terms of faults, just something as simple as the fault code. We are layering that fault code with its contextual data. And that contextual data then gives you an understanding of what is the criticality of the fault. You and I know that a lot of data which comes has to be filtered in terms of noise. You have to clean up the data. And then once you've cleaned up the data, there is a need to eliminate the noise in the data. And once you've done that, you will be able to get a clear understanding in terms of the characteristics of the faults which are coming in. And what do you do with that fault knowledge? A very simple example is today when the bus comes to the depot teams are already aware of the fault data which is coming in and what rectification to be done. So a lot of the service management which used to be done post facto after the buses come in today is being done on a real-time basis. Once you're doing on a real-time basis, obviously you're reducing the time, you're reducing the cost, and you're reducing, something as simple as the spare parts required. If you have a pattern of data which is coming in based on variabilities like seasonal variability, which city is giving what kind of faults, you can actually plan better in terms of inventory and spare part management. And once you started doing that, you can actually save a lot of cost, not only in ensuring that the uptime is guaranteed, but also in terms of what you are doing in terms of managing just the capacity planning of spares, of inventory, and things like that. Over and above this, what we've also started doing is we've started looking at patterns of data. So once the patterns of data are available, you can actually start looking at codes and start looking at what are the prerequisites or what are the problems which precede the fault which is coming in. And some of them could have correlations not necessarily with the battery, but other sources of data. And that is something that is being used to make sure that the asset is working all the time. If a cell temperature shows it's increasing, it could be a battery fault, it could be a coolant temperature fault also. So we just have to understand the root cause and then start going into predictive maintenance more than reactive maintenance. And over a period of time, what we are ensuring is operational excellence and increased uptime. At the end of the day, uptime management is what every asset owner wants. And when we are ensuring that, that means better utilization of the asset, better maintenance, and lower cost, more revenue. So I think we are going straight into the heart of the business problem and solving it using analytics intelligence coming from the battery data and now adjacency data as well. We are layering charging data, motor controller data together, more holistic view of the vehicle.
Right, that's such insightful perspective, Arjun, and thank you for, helping us understand with such a comprehensive and starting with your journey as to, what triggered the birth of the company and also, the core focus area that you guys are playing into it to address the certain challenges that we are currently facing in the EV industry. And, I think I really liked your point that, digital infrastructure is so much needed to power your physical infrastructure. And I think it's not about building bigger or powerful batteries, but it's also about making them smarter, as in when, we are progressing in this digital era. Now, what springs to mind, when people think about powering innovations of the future? More often than not, I think the answer revolves around sustainable energy, with the optimization of battery performance playing a very critical role. And one expected layer in this scenario is artificial intelligence, which is promising to revolutionize battery efficiency, lifetime, and even performance. So, just like a quick question, a follow up question that, what role, I mean, I think you did mention certain aspects of how what data plays an important role in terms of giving a holistic view of the performance, but what role do you think AI plays in, extending battery life or optimizing charging cycles and improving the overall EV performance?
So I'll give you just two examples. First and foremost, everyone talks about a concept called state of health. State of health is essentially a measure of how the battery is behaving and degrading over a period of time. Now, this is something which typically comes as a part of the battery data itself. It is, typically the battery manufacturers, basis the cell data, will make a certain commitment of what the life of the battery is. But a lot of the correlation of this data needs to be actually layered with the performance on the field, where we have built certain algorithms which checks for how the battery is actually performing in the field in terms of its degradation pattern. Now, the degradation of a battery can vary for multiple reasons. It could be issues related to design, it could be issues related to components, it could be issues related to even ambient. For example, a battery behaves in a certain way in the hilly regions, will also behave slightly differently in terms of its performance in the plain region. So if a say let's take a truck or a bus, if it's the same bus with the same design and same configuration of batteries, will give you a different performance if it's working in a hilly terrain versus if the bus is working in the plain region. And so there are different contexts and layers that you have to understand. And when we start layering the data, we use basically a lot of machine learning to kind of start looking at how the battery will behave in a certain pattern as long as the usage is maintained in a certain way. So what we do is, as I mentioned, one of the parameters that we are looking at is the aging and safety parameter. So that is one area that we definitely look at. And there are others as well. First and foremost, it is important to set a benchmark. The industry, of course, is relatively new, so there is no benchmark. So benchmark in terms of kilometers per kilowatt hour is a simple benchmark that we have to set. And when you have certain benchmarks which are set, then you keep looking at the performance against the benchmark and see how we can improve it, because that is at the end of the day how you improve the utilization. So AI is going to be very crucial going forward, because once you have contextual data, you can use the data to start establishing benchmarks and then measuring the benchmark, measuring the actual performance against the benchmark. And like any control system, once you have a feedback loop, you can actually then look at what are the reasons why a deviation is happening from the expected benchmark and then address those deviations. Better maintenance, as I mentioned, a better service maintenance. I mean, one of the critical problems, common problems that you keep looking at is cell balancing. The BMS is supposed to balance the data, balance the cell, and sometimes you have various conditions under which the cells don't balance. And obviously, a disbalanced cell will cause premature degradation if it is not addressed. A simple method of just addressing that disbalanced cell will increase the life of the battery. Just giving you one basic example. There are obviously much more complex use cases involved in terms of how charging can help. To give you just a very simple example, I mean, we were in discussions with an OEM where we were looking at how for a two-wheeler, how we can actually look at the battery data and make consumer experience much better. So just the experience of having a battery profile or the consumer's profile available in terms of an anonymized fashion, and then guiding the consumer as to where they can charge as per their pattern itself will go a long way in terms of bringing consumer benefits, or let's put it this, consumer experience. Another good example we've seen is in the B2B segment, where basis what is the charging available, one can, and how much of distance to charge, a vehicle can decide to take up an additional trip or go for an intermediate charging to take the trip, and then you can actually use AI to predict which is better for revenue. Do you do the trip first, and will there be enough charge for it to come back to the closest charging hub, or should you delay that? Or so these are constant decisions which are being taken basis the data which is coming out of the vehicle. And the idea is, at the end of the day, it's simple. The asset has to last. The asset uptime has to be as per the commitment given by the OEM and the battery manufacturer, benchmarking that with the data available, and then using the data to see if the benchmark is being met. Once we are able to establish that, I think consumer experience will improve, whether it's in the B2C segment and the B2B segment. And once consumer experience improves, I think a lot of the resistance towards adoption of electric vehicles will go away. And I think that is what we are trying to do, using data and AI and intelligence and analytics to essentially ensure that, as I said, it's safe, reliable, and affordable for the end users of the battery operated systems, and hence move towards a cleaner technology. That's the whole goal.
Definitely. Thank you for breaking it down so clearly, Arjun. And I think when we look at, I mean, after, listening to you, I think how we look at AI and data analytics in terms of, using and leveraging these technologies in the EV industry has shifted. And, I think they're no longer just supportive tools. I think they're the active drivers of efficiency and innovation. And of course, I think once we are, like you said, that you guys are focusing on improving the consumer experience by using these technologies. So I think you're also parallelly addressing some important and critical concerns in terms of the resistance that we have for EV adoption. And I think with intelligence, I think built into the system, we are making electric vehicles not just sustainable, but I think we're making it more smarter and user centric as well. Now, let's shift our lens to India. India has set ambitious EV adoption targets with both the government and industry pushing for faster electrification of two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and of course cars. But here's the reality. Much of India's EV ecosystem today is still focused on assembly and localization of parts. Now, while that's an important step, it doesn't necessarily build long term global competitiveness. I think the real opportunity here lies in battery intelligence. So, India has made significant strides, in EV assembly, but I think we need to also talk about the opportunity to leapfrog into becoming a global hub for battery intelligence. So, what would it take to make that transition, Arjun?
I think India is in a sweet spot. If you were to see the strength that India brings to the market, I think we have a huge workforce which is trained in IT and in all aspects of IT, whether it's data analytics, artificial intelligence. I think the DNA of the nation is driven by information technology and digital. So I think that is the first thing that we have to look at. And what we believe that for us to leapfrog into the next level, I think a lot of work is already being done. A lot of policy changes have happened, which have incentivized the adoption of smart batteries in terms of policy as well. Some of the policy changes which have come in the past. Also, what you're seeing is that as electric vehicles become ubiquitous, value added services will take off. And the first thing that is going to happen is a lot of financing will come into both batteries and battery operated systems like this. So, and every financier would want basically to understand how the data is, what is the data showing, how's the battery getting utilized. So I think first and foremost we have to ensure that every vehicle and battery that is going out into the market is a smart one, which is basically having data available so that we can build smarter systems and utilize all aspects of the infrastructure, including the charging infrastructure and the allied grid infrastructure, because all of this will be tied in finally. Once we've done that, I think India is a very unique market because we cater to every aspect of society. We have low speed vehicles, we have high speed two-wheelers, we have three-wheelers, we have commercial cargo vehicles in the what we call the L5 segment. We have electric buses. I think India has taken a huge step in terms of adoption of electric vehicles, electric buses, which is, I think, by far one of the most progressive policies which have been taken. And there's a huge amount of infrastructure and investments coming in there. And I must also talk about, all of this will finally dovetail into adoption of clean energy across the whole value chain. So charging infrastructure will finally at some point get driven by, the clean renewable energy, which is going to come from solar and wind and will require battery storage to power that. So all of this will need to get tied down into a seamless digital infrastructure, which will have a lot of AI and applications which will drive that. And once we've done that, I think we can become the hub for the global market as well. A lot of our solutions, whether it's in the emerging markets or whether it's in more mature markets, is something that we can take to the global world. I mean, at the end of the day, India has always been the pioneer in software services. So as long as we are able to leverage the infrastructure which is available, and as long as we are able to build the digital infrastructure and the allied applications, we can actually become the global hub. And it's a matter of time before we can actually launch some of these solutions at a global scale. We certainly intend to take this solution global, and I'm sure that others like us will also take this global. So it's a matter of time before you will see a lot of these digital platforms on battery and renewable energy coming out of India.
Yes, thank you for sharing those insights, Arjun. And it's fascinating to see how India has a chance not just to participate in the EV race, but also define it through intelligence-driven innovation. And you also touched upon some very important enablers, and I think that could truly put India at the center of this transformation. And of course, Iris is being at the forefront of it. So, having said that, one last question for you, Arjun, is that if you fast forward, 5 to 10 years, how do you see the future of global EV battery landscape? Or what are some trends you think will define the growth of India, particularly in the battery landscape?
There are two or three distinct trends that I'm seeing. One is the adoption of electric vehicle in public transportation is going to become very, very prominent. Globally, the electric bus segment, and of course, on the lower end of the market, which is the two-wheeler, three-wheeler segment, the emerging markets will definitely move towards electrification simply because of the price competitive advantage that battery operated vehicles provide over fossil fuels. And of course, at scale, the cost of cells and batteries are going to come down. So that is a distinct trend that we forecast, that public transportation will completely move towards electrification. In the private transportation space, there is also the competing hybrid vehicles which also have batteries which use regenerative braking to work. So there is going to be pure electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles, and we're not sure which of these will take off, but both of them will use batteries in some way. So I think we will see a huge trend even in the private space, but we clearly foresee that the public transportation space will be the drivers. And of course, the commercial utilization, that is the L5 and the commercial vehicles, electric buses, electric trucks, all of them. So that is one. Second is one big opportunity that we see globally is the battery energy storage system, which means that all renewable energy which is being generated today will move into battery, is to be stored and then utilized whenever needed. There are distinct benefits. Renewable energy by its very definition is not very stable, in the sense that you'll have huge variations in terms of generation. When the electricity is available, when the sun is available, there is a lot of generation. Nights there is no generation, and you need a battery system to kind of stabilize the entire generation, store it whenever it's required, and then use it later. So we see a lot of adoption of batteries in the utility grade as well as in the diesel replacement market. I think that's again the diesel replacement market, where generators will be replaced by battery storage, will be driven primarily by cost benefit analysis. So that's another trend that we see. And then what will happen is a lot of areas where you today traditionally will be using fossil fuel will start getting driven by batteries. So drones will be one big area where batteries will become center piece, because you're as good as the battery that you have inside the drone. Other industries like data centers, for example, will be big drivers of battery adoption. So we see that the larger energy piece will be driven by renewable energy, and renewable energy will necessitate a migration towards battery storage. And we believe that batteries will become centerpiece for a lot of things around the economy. So we believe that the battery storage will become central to our lives in the future, both in transportation and in the non-transportation space. So I gave you some examples. I think these are trends that we are seeing, and emerging markets will adopt a certain way, and the more advanced economies will also have their own adoption cycle. So, but different parts of the markets will adopt battery storage differently. But the trend towards, moving towards renewable energy will be driven by battery storage. I think that's a trend which is very, very clear to all of us, and we intend to ride the trend as well.
Right. I think the road to EV adoption is no longer just about putting more vehicles on the road. It's about ensuring those vehicles are efficient, reliable, and safe throughout their life cycle. And that means manufacturing scale and battery intelligence must go hand in hand. And also, let's not forget the broader impact. I think smarter batteries don't just power vehicles, they can connect with the grid, stabilize renewable energy flows, and even provide backup power during peak demand. I think, in other words, the impact of battery intelligence extends far beyond mobility. It ties directly with the future of sustainable energy. Well, thank you so much, Arjun, for taking out the time and effort to be on a podcast today and helping us understand that, how we are facing or we are going to witness the shift towards software led BMS in the EV section. And for India, I think this is also a moment of opportunity and opening to leapfrog into the next frontier of clean mobility and position ourselves not just as EV makers, but also as leaders in the brains behind EV batteries. Thank you so much for coming on a podcast today, Arjun, and it was lovely chatting with you.
Thank you, Priya, for the opportunity, and thanks a lot for giving
Great.
us a chance to share our story. Thank you so much.
This is for our listeners. Thank you for tuning into our episode today of Analytics Insight. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. I am Priya Dalani, and until next time, drive smart, stay sustainable, and keep looking to the future. You can view all our previous podcasts on Spotify and other leading platforms. Thank you so much.